Hello to all of our listeners out there in the land of blockchain and otherwise. My name is Alex Paul Manders, and I'm a director at the Information Services Group. My core responsibility is to lead and manage our ISG Blockchain Now global and services and solutions line. And I'm joined with my two colleagues, Jason Stading and Cole Flashenberg, as we explore the world of blockchain with a number of guest speakers and leaders, specifically from Dole, Bayer, MediLedger, Hashed Health, and Sprint. Our guest speakers are going to talk a lot about different applications and use cases as they relate to supply chain and otherwise. And we hope that you will find some value throughout the course of the series. Today, we're all excited to have Kim Harrington of Bayer join us for today's conversation. And before we get into the questions, Kim, it would be great if you could give us a little bit about your background and what you're currently working on with blockchain.
Sure. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. So I'm Kim Harrington, and I lead the Blockchain Center of Excellence at Bayer. And just a little about my background. I've been working on blockchain projects for several years now. I joined Bayer a little over a year and a half ago, and prior to that, I was with GE Aviation working on blockchain there as well. My background is in electrical engineering and mostly in software, both embedded programming and also application development for commercial software applications and things like that. And then in my recent career here, I've started to get involved with emerging technologies and innovation, and have started to lead the Center of Excellence at Bayer, focused on digital strategy and innovation, and specifically working on blockchain.
Fantastic, thank you. And my very first question is, you and I met each other at a conference in San Francisco, food and beverage conference, and you gave a very interesting statement on stage during your presentation about how you got interested and became involved with blockchain. So it would be great if you could share that story as to your journey with initially getting involved with blockchain and how it's gotten you to where we are now.
Sure, yeah. I really got inspired by what opportunities I saw for the technology in enterprise and business specific applications. So I wasn't necessarily drawn to the cryptocurrency side of it. However, especially in the early days, the biggest operating networks were the crypto networks. So I did start to get involved to really learn how the networks worked with kind of the crypto side of it. But I really started to investigate blockchain, and I really had kind of a starburst moment where I thought about this as being a very strategic technology for increasing efficiencies of business to business relationships. So kind of businesses working more efficiently with each other from an external perspective. And I bought a blockchain programming book, and I read it cover to cover in 2 days, and just right away was immediately inspired to continue to learn more. So after that point, I started to get into more of the software side of it, because all that was free and easy to start experimenting with. But then I did end up buying some computing hardware and built some GPU mining rigs, and then also had some ASIC miners as well. So at one point I had 18 mining computers in my basement, and really enjoyed that. So that was a great way to really figure out the ins and outs of how the networks really worked. And then also, I think it helped from an enterprise perspective too, because I could understand how we would change it when we would use that type of technology in an enterprise type deployment. So that's kind of how I got started with blockchain.
I think that's a great story, especially when you told it on stage in San Francisco, and just hearing it again. It kind of translates to some of the stuff, and also how I got started with the technology. It's much easier to explain it or understand it or further innovate with it with that hands-on experience. So again, I think you bring a pretty cool perspective to the listeners. So all that said, Kim, what is it that has specifically kept you excited about blockchain as a technology? I mean, you told us a great story about how you got started. What does the next couple of years look like in terms of the story that you want to tell, and really how does that translate back to what's keeping you energized and motivated?
Yeah, what's really exciting about this over the last several years, as I've gotten to kind of work with various parts of businesses to figure out where this technology is a good fit. It's really exciting to kind of go in and hear about challenges and business use cases that have existed for years and have been pain points for years. But there really, up to this point, hasn't been a great enabling technology to solve those use cases cost effectively, or at least in a workable fashion. So throughout my experience, something that has been exciting and really rewarding is talking about these business challenges that we now can solve that have existed for such a long time. So that's really rewarding to hear people talk about the kind of, this relief of finally having a solution that can solve some of the pain points they've dealt with for such a long time. So that's been really rewarding. And then also, as we've kind of gone into some deployments and implementations, what I've seen out of what we've delivered is that it's not only a technology solution that helps to provide a solution that can work faster or kind of digitize a previously manual process, but oftentimes the solution that we create is a higher capability solution. So it's not just about speed or simplicity, but we actually are able to do the job better in many ways, because there's a lot of ways that we can reduce out many types of errors or sources of manual entry that tend to lead to mistakes that can happen later on. So I would say, as I've really gotten into this, something that's kept me really motivated and excited about it is being able to solve kind of some of these long-standing challenges that there really hasn't been a great solution for up until now. And then when we've actually deployed, we've had systems that can really deliver a very high level of performance. That's been really exciting for me.
That's great. I mean, and we can hear it in your voice. It's that energy and excitement, which I think is fantastic. Because, like we say in the world of blockchain, it takes a community to make this work, and I think that you're a big advocate in the community to see it through. So, that said, let me kind of transition and ask a question around how blockchain fits in your specific industry and in the world of Bayer. We talk a lot about food and beverage supply chains and supply chains in general. There's all kinds of different use cases in different parts of the business, the back office and business-to-business transactions, B2C transactions. But, considering we have the source on the phone as part of this conversation, tell us how blockchain really plays a role in your industry today.
Sure. I think, like many industries, agriculture is very complex. So, there's many moving pieces. There's many industry participants, breadth of product, complex life cycles, and we still really operate, with various silos of information, siloed information and kind of inefficiency, and I think in some of our industry level interactions. And sometimes there's a lack of data and visibility or digitized processes or repetitious paperwork that kind of lead to this overall level of inefficiencies that we could come together to drive out of the industry. So I think that a technology like blockchain, which can really facilitate some of these more efficient business-to-business interactions, fits very well with what we can all do collectively to make the industry more efficient. And I think from a Bayer perspective, we certainly recognize that opportunity is there, and we want to be approachable in terms of collaborating on opportunities to work together as a broader industry. So I think like a lot of industries, agriculture is very complex, and this is a technology that can kind of help to ease some of the challenges of that complexity.
Yeah, and when it comes to the complexity that you're describing, a lot of that really revolves around the people involved, right? So complex organization, a lot of different stakeholders in different businesses. And so if we start to kind of think about this for a second, in terms of the type of stakeholder support that you currently have at Bayer or had in the past with GE when it came to blockchain initiatives, what should our listeners be aware of? What kind of stakeholders are you working with? What are the types of skill sets that the people you work with have when it comes to blockchain projects? What are the stakeholders or the groups that you work with and other companies that you're partnering with? That would be a fantastic, non-technical way to help our listeners think through who and how they should be interacting.
So really, both business and technical stakeholders are critical. One thing that I would say is that, so my organization is part of the technical organization. And I think what was really critical was the technical organization kind of making that first move to say to the rest of the business, yes, this is a viable technology that we understand and can successfully deploy. And then I think that really freed up the business stakeholders to think about what their business challenges were and not worry about the risk of trying to use a new technology or a technology that they may not have a certain comfort level with. So I think that kind of bringing both of those stakeholders together is really important. I think something that we did that was very successful for us was the technology organization made that very first strong move towards validating that this was an important technology that we understood and could deploy. So as part of that, on our team, we have both technical and strategic capability. So we can work with the business stakeholders to help them do an assessment for a strategic fit around what their business priorities are and where this technology might help them to accelerate achieving some of those business objectives. So we can help with things like business cases and going to funding reviews and things like that. And then when it gets to the point where the business has decided, yes, this makes sense for me and I want to pursue it, then we have some technical support that can help to very quickly run experiments and deploy on the technology so the business team can get to testing out what their business concept is and not have to worry about the technology piece of it. So I would say that kind of bringing everybody together is extremely important to getting projects off the ground. And working externally, we've found, something similar. We've oftentimes worked with both technical and business stakeholders because we really do need to understand the business processes and what the business objectives are towards solving a certain challenge or business use case. So yeah, a mix of stakeholders is critical.
And that's great. And also to kind of build off of that, if you were to start at ground zero, let's just say you go to a different firm and you're asked to, Kim, come join us. We want you to build out the team. How would you build it? Like, you're referencing the technical folks and the business folks, but how would you encourage our listeners to think, the future champions within the enterprise that you and I don't know yet? How would you suggest they get started?
To build a blockchain COE specifically?
Yeah, exactly. A center of excellence, a team, even if it's a couple folks that are just drinking coffee, talking about it, trying to come up with a strategy. Exactly.
Yeah. So I've seen this work a couple of different ways, and I am partial, I guess, to the center of excellence type of structure, which really means that you have both resourcing and budget. And I think that helps, particularly for emerging technologies. I think that kind of structure really helps to drive adoption and accelerates experimentation and learning on the technology. I do think that it's difficult for the business groups and operational organizations to take a risk on deploying new and emerging technologies when their budgets and time are challenged for real operational objectives that they also may have to deliver. And not that the organizations don't want to innovate or try out new things, but of course they have to balance what those risks are. So I think that something that's very critical is strong support and sponsorship from the technology organization. So kind of that leadership there that says, yes, we've evaluated this technology and you don't have to worry about the risk of this as an emerging technology. We can manage that, and free the business up to really focus on what the challenges are that they want to solve and what concepts they want to test out. And I think it's really important to have both that strategic and technical capability on the team. I think some of the challenges that we've really dealt with are really assessing for that strategic fit. There's really no lack of challenges and use cases that we've been able to discover, but often what comes down to a project that really gets going and takes off versus one that kind of fizzles out is kind of that timing of strategic fit. Is it a project that is important and urgent to solve for the organization at the time? So I think having, folks on the team that can help with that strategic analysis is kind of the first step to prioritizing what potential projects you could pursue versus ones that might be better if you wait a little bit. And then, of course, having that technical capability to be able to experiment very quickly, I think gets the business to an answer much faster. So they can really decide, very quickly, is this something that's important for me and that I want to pursue? And then I think the third thing is that the COE needs to have some level of budget. And that means that, in between funding cycles and, for running quick experiments and things like that, the COE itself can kind of step in to help the businesses pursue something that might be between a funding cycle, or that they may just not be able to appropriate funds within, current fiscal year to do that work. So I think those things are what's most important. Really strong support and sponsorship from the technology organization first to reduce the risk for the business, and staffing the team with both technical and strategic support. And then also, some level of budget to enable the COE itself to make decisions and pursue projects as quickly as possible.
That's wonderful. That's fantastic. And you mentioned a lot about the experiments and the quick experiments and proving out the value. So based on your experience, what are some of the kind of quick wins that, and not specific to your experiments, but when we say that an experiment was successful and it was done quickly, what were the factors that made it done quickly and as viewed as a value opportunity to further explore?
Yeah. So from a center of excellence perspective, something that we are really focused on is helping to enable that quick experimentation for the business. So some of that is strategic and some of it is tactical. So things like we've set up a test network So we can basically set a business organization up with instant blockchain infrastructure. So they don't have to worry about applying for cloud accounts and configuring communications and, spinning up and babysitting nodes and things like that. We've got all of that figured out. So a business team can get straight to just testing out what their business concept is. So some of a practical example of that, I guess, is we've had some teams who have run projects that have been, 6 to 8 weeks from complete start to completion. And we've been able to really enable that by having the technology ready to go for the teams to use immediately. We've also got some feedback from various teams that we've saved them significant cost over having to either do it all themselves or go externally to find that expertise. So we've gotten some really good data around how quickly we're able to help the business teams deploy new projects, and then also that cost savings because they're able to take advantage of some shared infrastructure as part of the blockchain COE. So that's been, I think, some of our success from just what we deliver back to the business. Out of those processes, we've also had some great projects go forward with some impactful results that I think have inspired confidence in some of the other business groups as well to just see how this has actually worked, how it's been applied, and then how some of those groups are putting a value on what the technology was able to do for them.
No, and that's great because one of the key words that I was hearing come through as you're walking us through the story is the business. So it sounds as though you have put a lot of thinking into making sure you have the right leadership in the IT or the technology department. You've got the right skills and abilities or capabilities to stand up a model that is really to the benefit of the business, to really help the business come in and say, here's a challenge that we have. How can we work with Kim and your COE? And that's really interesting and exciting for us to hear, because I also share the same opinion in that while it should be a technology supported initiative when it comes to the topic, it's really to drive forward the business. So I've said before that I think, for example, that the business should be the ones that are leading blockchain use cases and designing solutions where that is technically correct. If I understand what you're saying, that you've got the infrastructure or the technology backbone to support the creative innovations coming from the business. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. And we're not trying to just deploy technology to deploy technology. This is about identifying business challenges that are strategic and important, and then finding the right technological fit to enable what the business really wants to achieve. So you're absolutely right. This really starts out with what is the challenge and what are the strategic objectives. And then the technology is really, we've tried to do our best to make that as simple and straightforward as possible so that it's really the business concepts that we get to experiment and test on.
Kim, this is Jason here. It sounds to me like the COE has really cultivated an environment where it invites the business stakeholders to really come forward and help drive the change. When in a lot of organizations, you have the opposite. You have business stakeholders trying to catch up with the technology.
Yeah, we wanted to be an enabler for the business. So as part of our objectives to kind of drive digital strategy and innovation, we wanted to support the core businesses and in looking at how they could have an experimental mindset, testing and learning faster. So that was really what we had in mind when we kind of put the structure together for the COE.
Love it. Great. And so, Kim, I want to, since we're on the topic of successes, the question that everyone will always ask next is, what were your challenges? So what were some of the obstacles that you faced in terms of resistance in your vision to stand this up at both GE and Bayer?
Yeah. So, there's always challenge, I think, with new technology because it comes with greater risk. I think one of the things that turned out, I think, to be just an internal challenge was assessing for that right strategic fit. We did get feedback a lot that some of the projects that we were looking at or use cases that were identified were valid challenges, and that it certainly we could come up with a great solution for it, but maybe it wasn't the right time for the business to necessarily pursue or invest in that solution at the time. So that was, I think that was a surprise for me in some cases, but it is something to consider that there could be a great project and you could have a great solution for it. But, it's still important to think about what the overall goals of the business are and how do you prioritize and manage risk, and when is the right time to really pursue one thing versus another. So I would say the strategic side of our COE is what really kind of manages that type of challenge. And so I would say that that's a big challenge internally, is so kind of, managing priorities and strategic objectives with what projects are available and what you really choose to pursue. Externally, I think, something that this technology really, this is a collaborative technology, and you don't get a whole lot of benefit out of it just doing it yourself. So everything that we have done has been in collaboration with external parties. And, I think building those external teams is always a challenge, because you kind of have to, I think in some ways we're discussing some things that haven't necessarily been addressed before, or, kind of going back to some of the earlier discussion around some of these challenges have been in existence for years, but we just really haven't had an opportunity to resolve it. Kind of bringing all of these external parties together who may have not come together to work on some of these challenges, having some of these discussions for the first time, and really deciding how to move forward and collaborate together, I think is always a challenge to work on. But it's also been very rewarding, and I think something that has been really beneficial is that because all of our projects have been externally focused, it really has given us an opportunity to reach out to the industry and kind of create stronger relationships with external partners. So, I think there's always some challenges with external or with, emerging technologies, but it really has helped us, I think, make greater connections externally where we might not have otherwise done so.
I want to kind of build upon that idea of external facing solutions or collaboration, because there's multiple ways to shape a use case for blockchain. You can look internally in your back office operations. You can look externally to business partners in your supply chain. You can look to direct interactions from your business to the consumer. And you're talking, at least in the last couple minutes here, more about those external facing solutions is the area you picked. Well, could you walk us through the logic that you went through to focus on the external partnership when it came to shaping use cases? Like, how did you determine that was the quote unquote best strategic path that you picked? And then how did you work with those partners to come up with solutions?
Sure. So I kind of look at this as, some prior initiatives around efficiencies like Six Sigma and Lean and things like that, which were kind of these internally focused efficiency initiatives. I think blockchain and the type of work that you do when you deploy this technology is really more about external efficiencies. And so that, at least from my perspective, these, working externally and kind of looking at these business to business interactions versus what has been more traditionally looking internally for efficiencies. I think that's what is kind of groundbreaking about using blockchain. I think this is one of the first times where we have had a kind of a technology backbone that can really facilitate more efficient interactions in that way. So, I think that was definitely my position on it, and that's definitely from a Bayer perspective what we've collectively arrived at as the greatest the greatest opportunity, I think, for this technology is kind of looking for those external efficiencies. In terms of working externally, I think that's recognized between many of the partners that we have reached out to as well. I think in the very early days, there was a lot of just internal experimentation, which of course is natural. You kind of want to get hands-on with the technology to learn it and figure out how it works. Over the last year or so, I do think I've seen a lot of movement in terms of organizations really understanding that the opportunity here is not just using this by yourself, but that the opportunity really is with working externally and kind of looking at a broader industry level around what opportunities for greater efficiency at the industry level should we collectively look at. So from my perspective, this isn't just looking for internal efficiencies. This is really about looking for external efficiencies. And I do think among the various industry players over the last year or so, I've seen a lot of movement in that direction towards kind of coming to that same conclusion.
That's great, and thank you for that explanation. And so, Kim, before we take and jump over into some more fun questions that will give the audience an opportunity to learn a little bit more about your character, I want to turn it over to Cole for the next question.
Yeah, hey Kim. So, what advice would you give to anyone in an enterprise who is looking to kind of create a blockchain solution or eventually develop into a blockchain COE? I know we've spoke about the blockchain COE being a bit of a liaison between technology and business. So what advice would you give to someone who's looking to start that process?
I would definitely say to start with the business challenges and the external relationships. I think that where the technology becomes an enabler at some point, and in some ways the technology piece of it can almost be more straightforward than kind of managing the relationships and putting together the teams that would eventually deliver the solutions. So the technology plays a piece of it, but don't start with the technology. Start out with the why around, why you're coming together. So I think looking at the business challenges and the strategic priorities, and then looking at the external relationships that you would need to create or grow to be able to deliver on those solutions or those use cases is the place to start. And we have been, I think, very careful around how we have approached that from a Bayer perspective. We very much have focused on working through building the relationships and getting very crisp around what we are collectively focused on and doing versus jumping right into building a technical solution. So I would say to certainly start out with business challenges and external relationships and focus only on the technology piece when you're really crisp about what you're collectively working on, what you're trying to achieve, and what everybody gets out of it. So that's the advice I would give.
I have a question for you around really what advice would you give the listeners and the audience for if they want to get hands-on experience or information to homework to take up on and learn more about blockchain and how to really do it right? What resources would you recommend to them? Websites, industry conferences, working groups, those type of things.
Sure. I mean, I'm just partial to going on to GitHub and finding out, some of the new information. And there's even some training packages that I'd put together that we deliver internally on the COE that I hadn't gone back and updated for a little while. And then I just recently went back to see what all of the new releases were. And I learned so much about just the changes that have happened from a software perspective over the last year. So, so I mean, in general, I'm partial to just kind of, staying in touch with the software community and staying on top of what new releases and new capabilities are being distributed. It's always important to, I think, to just stay in touch with, your favorite news source, for example, and then search for or filter for blockchain-based news. Because there's always a lot of, there's new companies that are launching new types of technologies or that have a new and interesting focus. There's beyond the specific technology piece of it too, there's a lot of good press releases around what other industry players are focused on or how they're coming together to address particular challenges. So, I think just staying updated with what's happening in your industry from, maybe a non-technical perspective through your favorite news source is always helpful. Or just, if you want to play around with the technology, staying engaged with pages on GitHub to see, what's being released. And of course, if you're partial to a particular type of technology too, just kind of keeping up with that company and staying on top of kind of what they're doing and how they're growing.
Love it.
All right.
Great advice.
So, Kim, we're going to transition into a couple of fun questions that they don't all have to be related to blockchains, and that's designed to kind of give the listeners a little bit more insight into you as a person. So that said, I'm going to turn it over to Cole and Jason to ask you the next 3-4 questions or so. So, Cole, go ahead.
All right.
Thanks, Alex. Right. So, Kim, what's a low technology hobby that you have and might enjoy doing during your downtime or any off time you might have?
Sure. So I do enjoy playing golf. So I really like to do that. I don't feel like I get to play golf enough. But I also enjoy baking. I like cooking in general too, but I really enjoy baking. And I like to, decorate cookies and things like that, like detailed decorations. And I also enjoy just like scrapbooking and crafts and things like that. So whenever I need kind of a low technology hobby, that's probably my big three: either golf, baking, or crafts and scrapbooking.
Cool. That sounds fun.
I love it.
I like scrapbooking.
And we at the podcast take all baking donations.
I love to eat what's baked.
Yeah.
Okay, so Kim, I have a follow-up question for you. If you could create a technology to do something that you don't like to do, what would it be?
Yes. If I could create a technology that would respond to all my emails for me and put my laundry away, I would do that.
Love it.
Yeah. All right.
Stuff. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. The third question we have is, what's a career aspiration that you have going forward, either technology or non-technology related?
Yeah, so I have always thought about maybe starting my own business of some kind, or designing something. I always feel like I have a lot of ideas of things that I want to build. So that's something that's always kind of in the back of my mind. I think with blockchain, one of the big challenges that we're going to be faced with is kind of the IoT piece of it. So as we start to get data flowing into the systems, we want even more and more of that automated versus having that, be manual entry or something else that could be error prone. So I've been thinking a lot about IoT type devices, and I've been experimenting a lot with Arduino components and things like that to try to build my own prototype IoT devices for some of the blockchain applications that I'm working on currently. So I've always thought about, maybe starting a business or just at least designing something myself to put into production. So yeah, that would be a career aspiration that I haven't achieved yet.
That's awesome. I find the correlation between IoT and blockchain networks super fascinating as well. So that's really cool.
Yeah. And my background is in controls and electronics and things like that. Yeah. So in some cases, it's so frustrating because I'm like, I know we can do this. The technology exists to do this. I think it's a challenge of economies of scale, really,
right.
In these very specific use cases. But that's kind of a daily frustration for me because from a technology perspective, I know it can be done.
Right. Yep. I totally see what you mean.
So Kim, one of our last questions we've got here is, it sounds like that you've hands-on experience in a wide breadth of technologies, which has been fantastic to hear about. Our question is what is your favorite technology application or device that you've come across?
Yeah, this may be not a very exciting answer, but I love my iPad. The phones are too small to use for any extended period of time. So I love my iPad, and I was never really a Mac user at all. I've for my whole life pretty much been more of a PC type of person. But that product has really resonated with me, and I really can't do without it.
That's great. That's great. And you can do all kinds of different things on the iPad. It's an interesting response that we get from everyone on that particular question.
Yep.
Well, wonderful. Well, Kim, I know we're almost out of time, and we wanted to thank you for all your support and time. Do you have any questions for us?
So I guess my one question would be, from your all's perspective, what are the major trends or things that you're seeing happening in blockchain and agriculture?
That's a really good question. I think what I would say at the highest level is that education is becoming more proficient. People seem to have now finally got over well, not in all cases, but in many cases, got over the idea that blockchain is Bitcoin and that we only have one application of blockchain for digital currency. I would say in agriculture, even when we look at the new era of smarter food safety, changes that are coming out of Washington, D.C., when we talk to different organizations that play a role in different parts of the supply chain, people are now saying common themes around track and trace and consumer safety, stuff that you and I are aware of, but it's much more consistent than it was a year ago. Now, I'm not saying that that's perfect educational situation. I would say that we're taking steps in the right direction to better educate the people that need educated.
I'll add one thing that we're seeing, and Alex, feel free to step in as well, but at first, when blockchain started to come up as a concept and a buzzword, you saw little pockets of innovation and certain blockchain networks that may be industry or use case specific. But what's interesting now is we're starting to see different networks overlap. in the exchange of data across blockchain environments. And that's really interesting as well.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, and I think kind of touching on both those answers, the consumer touch is really driving a lot of the B2B transactions as well. For example, the food trust or any track and trace technologies, a consumer sees that and sees the benefit. They're going to start to demand more and more track and trace products that they're going to buy, which in turn will start to develop the supply chain and that in the blockchain ecosystem further. So I think that's a great opportunity that once the public starts to learn what it can do and what the benefits can bring, it will start to drive innovation earlier and earlier in the food chain.
Interesting.
Well, Kim, we want to thank you again for your time. We're gonna leave you be to go change the world of blockchain now as we continue to interview people such as yourself with hands-on experience in the day-to-day routine. So thank you again for all of your time, and we certainly appreciate your help.
Sure. Thank you. I was glad to talk today.
Well, we hope you found today's podcast episode valuable and insightful. And on behalf of the Information Services Group, Jason Stading and Cole Flashenberg, we'd like to thank you for listening. And we encourage you to listen to the future episodes. And also, with any questions you might have about ISG or ISG Blockchain Now, please visit isg1.com to learn more about our firm and what we do with blockchain. Thank you.